Hello, everybody. A while ago, there has been a post on Reddit that had a fairly interesting topic that I thought that we should investigate together because it's just something to ponder. So, one user that uses both Chinese and English media has found a topic being discussed on Rednote. Topic on Chinese Rednote. Why are there so few fan creations for Infinity Nikki? He starts this post off, he or she, could be a she, most likely a she considering the game. They would be the correct word usage here. They start off the topic by saying, note, this topic may contain negative emotion. If you don't want to read it, I gently suggest you to swipe away. This topic is not representative of all Chinese players. I think that that's very important to note. This topic may describe a portion of Infinity Nikki fandom in China, and it is easy to create a filter bubble on Rednote, where there's only one opinion and one opinion. I also want to point out that the topic starts with, why are there so few fan creations for Infinity Nikki? And if you ever make that sort of statement, or if you ever formulate a question like that, there's already an assumption that there's very little fan work for Infinity Nikki to begin with, and you're not really basing your opinion on anything. It's like if I started a question by, why is there so little bread in the pantry when we have 3 loaves? Like, I can say that that's a lot of bread for a household, or I can interpret it as there being very little bread. I am already making an interpretation and a judgment, and people answering my question will be answering the question based on, why is there so little bread in the pantry? They wouldn't even consider that maybe there's actually a lot of bread in the pantry. Regardless, you believe there's a lot or a little bread in the pantry. I think that the answers that the players have given are quite interesting. I highlighted it in green, the answers that I want to read. I'm linking the whole thread in the description down below. I'm trying to avoid as many responses that are just conversations happening between two people, or responses that just reinforce a singular opinion, to just have more of a variety of the opinions. I think there's still a common thread that we're gonna discuss at the end of this video that all of these opinions paint, but if you want to read every single one copy-pasted comment translated to English, the thread is in the description down below. So why are there so few fan-made creations for Infinity Nikki? User 1. Ever since the previous NPC controversy, the story turned into a Nikki worship show where NPCs barely get screen time. In this environment, the post can be flooded with criticism from accounts with the chibi crown Nikki avatar. So effectively, if your fan work similarly does not worship Nikki, you get attacked by people for posting this fan work. And when they mean the whole NPC controversy, they mean all the way back in 1.2, when Marquis Jr. has gotten more of a patch to himself, and apparently quite a large population of people didn't like that. They didn't like that Nikki wasn't in the spotlight, and from there on end we started getting stories where Nikki is incredibly in the spotlight and incredibly graced, and everybody's just like worshipping her hands down, and she's getting complimented maybe like 5 times per sentence. User number 2. I love reading fan works for every game I play, but I have absolutely no desire to read Infinity Nikki fan works because the fandom atmosphere is too weird. There are nitpickers, moral police, and people constantly attacking creators. The only content I can tolerate is outfit recommendations, and even then, I only glance occasionally. Why would I want to consume fan content in an environment every day? There's a reason the fandom traffic is so low. User 3. There are literally comments saying a picture has 0% Nikki content just because Nikki herself isn't in it, even if the character is an NPC from Infinity Nikki. Also, I find it quite interesting that they're calling it Nikki 5th because I think this is the 5th Nikki game instead of calling it Infinity Nikki. Alternatively, it's called something else in China, so if you're a Chinese player, do let me know. User 4. Is the algorithm bubble really that severe? I feel like there are so many fan-made videos for Nikki 5, Infinity Nikki. I see them all the time on Douyin, like edits, photoshops, story recreations, etc. So once again, if you pose a question of why is there so little bread in the pantry, majority of people will be answering as if there's a little bread in the pantry, no matter how much bread in the pantry there is. So here's one opinion that goes against the thread that goes, is there little bread in the pantry really? Is there too little bread? User 5. Most Infinity Nikki fan content revolves around outfits. Story-driven fan art, point of view edits, comedy videos, hand-drawn works, and fanfiction are very rare. User 6. Moreover, it feels like there's no depth or anything worth exploring. Everyone just endlessly praises Nikki's beauty. Pure aesthetics without narrative substance can't really inspire creators. User 7. The first video I found online was about why people didn't like the Floor Wish storyline because Marcus Jr. got too much spotlight. They felt the story didn't revolve around Nikki, thought Nikki became just a tool in the story. And this explains why the Itzalan storyline turned into Nikki's path to godhood. User 7. First, the NPCs lacks character development. There's no tension between Nikki and other NPCs, nor between the NPCs themselves, resulting in a lack of motivation for fan creation. Second, the Nikki community is prone to criticizing fan works, nitpicking, and conducts witch hunts. With so little encouragement, it's a miracle there are any fan works at all. User 9. Fan creators love shipping characters, but in this fandom, you get attacked for shipping. User 10. Fan art makes up the majority of derivative works, but what kind of fan art can be drawn for Infinity Nikki? There aren't even any couples. How long can a community survive just by drawing personal portraits, game references, and outfit combinations? User 11 now, maybe? I lost count. I'm just numbering them to have something to differentiate one line from another. It's boring. The whole game revolves around character relationships, yet if you mention wanting ships, people accuse you of being romance obsessed. The official team is ridiculous. Honestly, it's terrifying when a game's direction gets controlled entirely by fandom backlash. Players even managed to cancel collaboration events before. That's genuinely scary. User 12. The main storyline was ruined the moment they deleted the opening in pursuit of something high class. User 13. Because Nikki's mom, that's users that are overly possessive over Nikki, so they identify themselves as a Nikki's mom. It was something that previous games kinda encouraged you to do because they didn't place you in the shoes of Nikki. They placed you in the shoes of Nikki Keeper. So a lot of people are still kinda like, I'm a parent and she's my child dynamic. Because Nikki's mom doesn't accept Nikki having a romantic partner, nor does she accept NPCs having independent storylines. It's so weird. You develop characters like that. The characters all feel emotionally isolated from each other in the main story. Nikki was literally collapsing, and male NPCs didn't even dare help her out. The avoidance feels comparable to the entertainment industry. User 13. Actually, I used to create NPC-related content back in Shining Nikki, but the NPC categorization in Infinity Nikki is so bland, I lost all motivation. User 14. It deserves it. For example, warnings everywhere. Warning! NPCs stealing Nikki's spotlight. Warning! Gives male characters too much charm. Warning! Self-insert warning. Warning! Romance warning. User 15. I started shipping the two little dragons from the new story, so I assume it's McGill and the other guy. And I still have to carefully choose tags before posting because I'm afraid of getting attacked. Meanwhile, my homepage keeps showing posts demanding NPCs, especially male NPCs, treat Nikki better. They're turning a perfectly good dress-up game into an otome game while refusing to admit it. User 17. There are so many extreme Nikki moms now that they even attack each other. I once saw someone asking if their original character could wear clothing from the game, and people accused them of stealing Nikki's clothes and copyright infringement. Back then, people used to be happy whenever they were told that Nikki was the designer. User 18. Most NPCs are written too blandly to inspire fan creations. Characters like Medell, with their well-developed and compelling personalities, generate far more fan art. User 19. There's no tension. If you've seen any other fan-made content, or if you created your own fan-made content, you'll find what motivates people to create fan-made works is usually something with strong tension. User 20. Yes, I've got it. And tension often breeds controversy. Many games that are incredibly popular also have a huge number of detractors. But this game doesn't allow for any controversy whatsoever. Characters must be flawless, praised by everyone, and devoid of any tension. User number 21. Because the characters are too one-dimensional. White is always white, black is always white. The plot is relatively lighthearted and straightforward without much controversy. While female fanfiction authors often prefer characters who are twisted, dark, struggling, sacrificing, fragmented, and viciously torn apart. Your Su Nuan Nuan, that's what they call Nikki, solves everything with a wave of her right hand. Invincible. How lonely. That actually is a good idea if anyone wants to write some fanfiction. How lonely would it be to be an omnipotent god? When nobody else can compare to you, you are literally perfect and you can solve everyone's issues with the wave of your hand, but everyone is also mysteriously kind of too afraid to approach you and interact with you in like a social setting or a social way. So you're kind of just like the isolated person that solves everyone's problems. I think Infinity Nikki can be made into a very good horror storyline if anyone wants to do fan content around that. User number next user, let's call them A. I have lost track now. Clothes are difficult to draw. This one got me kind of chuckling, but I wanted to include because, variety of answers. User number B. I've always felt that the popularity of Infinity Nikki among women after its release is like a demon locking tower for certain extremists. Even the smallest issues are severely criticized. For example, high heels are criticized, compression stockings are criticized, waist revealing two-piece dresses are criticized, anything that shows a woman's breast curves is criticized, and even male characters with a lot of dialogue in the story are criticized. Is this something I can say? And to end this whole write-up, the whole tirade, the person that posted this posted, personally, I think Nikki fandom is not as intense as other games, in China or global. There are multiple games that have aggressive and toxic fandom, but the fandom still has an abundance of fanworks and fanfics because the original source have a lot of tension between characters or great world building. For example, Genshin Impact, the fandom is so toxic. Different ships often attack each other and creators often get harassed when they still have many fanfics. In the global community, I used to see some people on X say that we should not ship Nikki to male character because she is a lesbian. So let's start here. I don't think that the global fandom is all that toxic. I've been in games that are... A lot of games are like so much worse. Old school RuneScape is very hardcore raiding obsessed and attacks their own women very easily. The Sims is like a powder keg. I had negative comments just for playing The Sims 4. Paralives Inzoi is like another shoe to life simulation community. It's those people are just really aggressive, and I don't know why. Heartopia was very hit and miss. Once again, had some people doing fan art. It also had some creeps and would inflame really easily. Having spent a lot of time in Infinity Nikki's community, I think we can be a little toxic. Sometimes people get either toxically positive or toxically negative. Like this pendulum swings both ways. Like when outreach starts going, it's like it keeps on rolling and keeps on rolling and keeps on rolling. And then on the other side, when things calm down, if you come in and even if you say something reasonable, like, I think that they're like overcharging us on the store outfits, or oh, the game is very hard for me to play now that they made this difference of a choice, or I'm experiencing a bug. You can get like disliked into oblivion for experiencing a bug. So I've seen some like really weird side cases to this, but overall, I think in general, Infinity Nikki community leans towards chill. Mind you, I only have the global Reddit side to experience. Infinity Nikki official Discord is a bit too noisy for me, and Twitter, formerly Twitter, now X, just tends to house weird people in general. People that will get offended over there being too many apples or too little pears. They get offended over absolutely everything. I've heard the TikTok audience also can get offended over absolutely anything. I've had heard of horror storylines from content creators that do post to TikTok because I am inevitably running in the Infinity Nikki content creator circle, which means knowing even about platforms that I don't actually use. I've heard people getting attacked for content that's too similar to one another, even though we will all be covering the exact same patches. I've heard of people getting attacked for shipping in general. Shipping is when you and place Nikki and another NPC together as a couple. And if you do this with male characters, it is indeed a lot more aggressive than if you do this with female characters. I've also heard people attacking creators that do not have a voice, or their voice sounds too close in cadence to AI. So, like, if you're making voiceless work, you get attacked very easily. If you make work where you're trying to be talking in it and are trying to sound as proper as possible, people also attack that very easily. So, uh, TikTok is just as Twitter also a powder keg, but I don't think that the global community in general is all that bad compared to other games. So like I agree with this person, but obviously I don't know the Chinese side. I don't have the Chinese side. They're the ones with the Chinese insights. I'm not the one with the Chinese insights. Now, let's talk about the complaints leveraged at the game rather than the fan site itself. I think 2.5, 2.6 is showing us a better way of making characters in general, because Model is a much more interesting villain than anything that we have had before, because she technically has a reason for doing these things that can be perceived as not being entirely awful. So, on one hand, she's trying to commit genocide. That's that's never to be forgiven. On the other hand, she and her people are stuck in an endless cycle of reincarnation when all of them are essentially cursed with a what could be equivalent to a genetic disease where they're in more and more pain and spend more and more time in pain until eventually they die from it. And every single time when they reincarnate, it seems that the amount of days without pain are shortening. So, it's kind of situation where you might be pushed into complete hopelessness. The fact that we're tackling these kind of themes, I think, is a lot more interesting, and it calls for a lot more complex characters. So, I do agree that Infinity Nikki started with very forward storylines. Were like they were very strictly, this is white, this is black, this is good, this is bad. Now we're getting into slightly more interesting villain design, and I think that we should continue doing that, because in no way is Medell not a villain. In no way you can actually justify her actions. But she's not a one-sided person. And that's how you want to write your characters. Like, no matter what your life situation is, you're not gonna excuse genocide. But it's good when the character is not just like, I am evil for the lols, or I want all the power, or just I want all the world to just die. They have to have, like, deeper motivation. So the fact that we're now having deeper motivation, I think it's the way that they're gonna continue writing, and I think that the writing has definitely improved in that respect. However, I do believe that characters are almost too afraid to interact with Nikki. Don't interact with Nikki in the long term. Get removed off our sites very, very fast. We still tend to churn through characters too fast instead of staying around and getting to know them. There's not really a lot of cross-character interaction outside of them interacting with Nikki either. And of course, there's very little of anything that can be interpreted as tension between Nikki and other characters. The last time I think we got actual genuine tension between Nikki and other characters was the Dragon Lady from 1.8. Even the ending of it is so open-ended because she seems to be tied to Nikki, and even though it's not the same Nikki, it's like a Nikki. The cat Nikki wasn't a Nikki. The cat was a cat. Okay, that storyline is hard to explain. But she managed to draw a Nikki into the world, or rather, she drew a Nikki intuitively, I guess, and it kind of fell into the reincarnation pool. So there was a version of a Nikki in their world that wasn't like fully sentient and sapient. She was just kind of following a script until the script ended. But because that was a Nikki, it connected it to the Nikkiverse, allowing the Nikki to step in, and then she got to take on the qualities of not just the Nikki character, but the painter. And the painter cat lady is the one that created the koi fish dragon woman. So they also probably had a romance together. At the very least, it's implied that they were partners. And then at the end, you kind of see the same kind of tension and the same kind of vibes between her and Nikki. I think players greatly enjoyed it. Nikki is a very restrained game, so there's never anything like overtly sexual about it. But I think that kind of tension of this is fated, they were partners before, like, here we are as different people, let's have a conversation. I think this kind of tension is actually a welcome entry into the fandom, and people would appreciate those kind of storylines. And I think that they do appreciate those kind of storylines. The real shame here is that we then take a dragon lady and we put her into the bag of that's the patch that featured the dragon lady, and then she doesn't get to climb out of it practically at all. We did get to see her again during 2.2, I think. At the very least, we saw somebody from that storyline. I'm pretty sure it was her, but I might be wrong. But she was kind of like a little Easter egg, like a character just like at the background. 2.2 also got praised for giving Tanyu a bit more of a background, a bit more of a personality. It allows you to figure out more about what kind of character he is, and I think that's very much what is needed in Infinity Nikki. We need a repetitive cast that keeps on reappearing throughout the patch cycles, is not just stuck to their own patch cycle, that also travels and does things that we can rerun into in order for us to get to know them as people and for the world to feel more alive. The cast interacting between themselves is also encouraged. Like, Miguel and his boy friend, it's implied in lore that you can find that they're destined to be partners of one another. There's some artwork hints of it as well, such as the black-haired dragon guy's loop on his horn is identical to the kind of loops that Miguel, as the clan chief, wears. I think these kind of details are excellent, and that the characters inside the game should be grounded inside having some sort of connection to other characters and the environment that they're on. Effectively, what you want is interpersonal storylines happening in the background. We don't necessarily need to be privy to it, but they need to be there and they need to happen in order for these characters to have some depth and in order for this game to not be very bland on the NPC side. And you do need non-bland NPCs as recurring characters with some character development if you want people to be engaged in Nikki's position in the lore and in the world. And then, of course, we can't really have romance because it's not that sort of a game, but there is a lot of things that the company could do to facilitate a little bit of play with people behind closed doors and private. Like, for example, I'm gonna repeat this for the, I don't know, 90th time now. Just like, let me collect notable NPCs and place them in my house. Let me build little rooms for them. Genshin allows you to do that. They don't even need to like perform specific animations or have a lot of animations to perform. They all can be like stuck in one animation, but it allows me to have them as a photo prop. And if I'm already engaged in the character themselves, because they do have some story development, and I can place them inside my house as a photo prop, you know, fan-based stories kind of start happening and going from there on end, if you know what I mean. But we don't really have those kind of tools, and I think that we still have a long way to go until we have a proper cast of reoccurring characters that kind of pop up in patches that they didn't originate from, that we learn a little bit more about and relate to, because now we have learned a little bit more about them and it places Nikki into the living world. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of places where Infold could improve on that front. And I think that the criticism here is very valid, even though I don't agree with it 100%. Like, there's notes that are already changing from what they're observed to be happening in here in particular. So, That's a very interesting thread. I would like to ask you guys, what do you think about it, and what do you think about the whole conversation? And of course, if you are from China and you know about the Chinese fandom, feel free to pitch in about why do you think Infinity Nikki doesn't have a lot of fan-made content? And quite specifically, even, does it or doesn't it have a lot of fan-made content? Because if I just ask you why it doesn't, then that immediately implies that it doesn't, and I'm not really gonna go out of my way to make that judgment. I think that that judgment is a little bit subjective, but I still think that this is an interesting topic to discuss. So, thank you for sticking with me so long. Thank you for watching. Once again, if you want to read it, the full thread is in the description down below. Thank you so much for my Patreon supporters, and toodaloo for now.